Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to remind you the t-shirts are ready at the ClassicsToday.com shop. Just head on over there or check the link below in order to access the merchandise selection. It's summer. We're in short sleeves now, at least in the northern hemisphere. But now that I've done my pitch, we need to talk about yet another Claudio Abbado box. Haven't we done this before? Actually, this is the earliest one of them, or probably the earliest one of them. And then they started doing them by place. There was Abbado in Berlin, and Abbado in Vienna, and Abbado in Chicago, and Abbado in London, and Abbado in Brooklyn, and Abbado in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And this is the Symphony box. He does symphonies, most of which he's done a million times, but this is a selection of them. And their selection of them isn't even always the best selection of them. So let's just see what we got. Well, first of all, we get a lot of empty space. As you can see, these jack-in-the-box flappy things that are very irritating. And then they're sort of color-coded. And I'm just going to go through the booklet because they're not like original jackets or anything. Abbado never really had very interesting original jackets to begin with. And yeah, they're all sort of the same here. They don't even have photos. They're just like, here's a typical, not terribly interesting. That's what they look like. So let's just go through the book and see what we've got. Unbelievable. You know, I have to say, looking at these boxes, we've gone through just about all of them, except there was, I think, a Decca box for his early years, like the early years it was called or something. I mean, maybe we'll look at that. I don't know. Here's the thing. I just cannot believe how much money major labels, Sony and Universal, invested in this guy. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And let's say he was as good as they tried to tell us he was. I mean, he wasn't, but let's say he was. The amount of duplication was just nuts. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that as we go through this. So let's start at the beginning. Now, one of the things about this box, because it's symphonies, is that we can actually cover some things that don't fall into any of the orchestra or town or region or other themes that they came up with. You know, there was the vegetarian box, and then there was the carnivorous box, and then there was the dessert box, and then there was the vegan box, which, in case the vegetarian box wasn't good enough. And there was the kosher box. Let's not forget about the kosher box. And the halal box. I mean, you know, it was an Abbado box for everybody. So first, CD1 is Mozart Symphonies 35, 29, 33 with Orchestra Mozart. And then they keep going on CD2 and CD3. You get 38, 41, 39, and 40. These are all live recordings. And I have to say, without any hesitation, that Abbado in the classical repertoire was usually dreadful. And his Mozart is dreadful. I mean, for the Orchestra Mozart recordings, he started doing sort of like period-y style instrument stuff, but mixed with his own micromanaging, grotesquely interfering conducting style. And when you put those two things together, it was absolutely like putting chocolate sauce on asparagus. It was just vile. A repulsive combination of extraordinarily effete, interfering, annoying interpretive mannerisms with a terribly inexpressive, uninteresting, and pallid instrumental sonority. Is that what you want in your Mozart? I didn't think so. So that covers discs 1 through 4, 1 through 3. I don't even know how many discs are in here. Does it say? I don't know. Well, it goes up to 41. Oh, we have quite a haul here. All right. So then we get his Haydn, in which you get, oh, goodness gracious, you get symphonies 93, 96, 98. These are with the Chamber Orchestra of Europe. You get the overture to Il Mondo della Luna, and then you get the Military of the Clock, 102, and the drum roll, and the Symphony Concertante. And these are all with the Chamber Orchestra of Europe. And like the Mozart, they are dreadful, only more so. His Haydn is even more horrible, if possible, than his Mozart. And the reason is because, unlike Mozart, who you can get away with being very pretty and very smooth and very sensual and lyrical, that you can do. And Abbado could do that. Haydn, you can't. Haydn requires two things that Abbado always had problems with in any music he did, just about. Number one, a sense of humor. And he had no sense of humor. A very strange person. And, musically, I never got any feeling of fun in what he did. Even when he conducted Rossini, he was fabulous conducting Rossini, but he got by, not because it was fun, but because of the minute attention to detail and the pattern making that the music often involves, that he did so superbly well. And if the singers had fun, then the music had fun. It was okay. But his conducting, very, very seldom. It was the same thing when he did like Rossini overtures. Characterful woodwind playing from the Chamber Orchestra of Europe, yeah, sounds fine. But from him, no. I never got a sense of fun in his music and in his music making. And in Haydn, that is a killer. And the associated quality to do Haydn well that creates fun and comedy is timing. You need comic timing. Abbado had no sense of timing in most of the music he conducted. It was never, he really had issues with shaping large spans in instrumental music. Not so much on the stage in opera where things sort of take care of themselves, but in large orchestral works where you really needed a sense of dramatic timing, he could be very, very deficient. And Haydn really needs that. And these performances are so uninteresting. Oh my God, they're horrible. So forget Haydn and Mozart. Now we're up to disc 7, and we've got Beethoven. And this was terribly, terribly interesting because, as you know, there were 2 Beethoven cycles that came out very, very quickly. First, there was the Berlin Philharmonic one. Well, remember, he did a whole slew of Beethoven cycles. Let's not forget, there was the Vienna Phil Beethoven cycle, which was okay, but not terribly fabulous. And that had also, that was the issue with that one, was timing, was off in most of that music. He corrected that largely in the Berlin Phil cycle, which was done with, smaller ensemble and, with a nod to period practice here and there. But the ostensibly new, fabulous, wonderful, amazing, epochal, dazzling Beethoven cycle he did in Berlin turned out to be an incredible snooze. It was unbelievably boring, but simultaneously with that, there was a bunch of videos of the same music that he made in Italy with the Berlin Philharmonic, and those performances were like a lot better. I don't think that they were fabulous for the most part still. They're good. They're very good. But were they like inspiring? No. But they were a hell of a lot better than the first ones. And so Deutsche Grammophon very sneakily withdrew that first cycle and substituted the soundtracks of the second cycle. By and large, there's just one minor exception we don't need to get into. So don't go there and correct me on this. That's what they did. And I gotta tell you, it was a real sneaky move because everybody knew it was bad. Everybody did. And, then they sort of acknowledged it by doing that. But of course, nobody could say anything about it. And that is just another example of how much money they were willing to piss away on this guy. He's got 3 Beethoven cycles on the same label, none of which are among the most recommendable. And there are 3 of them. And one of them is a complete dud. And I made sure that the non-dud remake is the one that's in here. That's what's in here. But really, it's an astonishing story. It really is. People don't talk about it. I mean, I guess nobody cares. I mean, let's face it. But if you were in the business, like I was in the business and am in the business, it was amazing. It was just amazing. There was just this, everybody knew. And I remember, I'll tell you exactly a story that was really it's very true. The same year that this Abbado, Farrago showed up, the Barenboim cycle came out on Teldec, which with the Staatskapelle Berlin, which was marvelous. And I was running the Cannes Classical Awards at the time, and we gave an award to the Barenboim Beethoven cycle because it was marvelous. And Barenboim actually showed up to pick up his award, which was a whole nother issue because there was a whole big fight about who would pay for his private jet, and he was so busy and he had to go. I had no patience for artists. I didn't want him to come because I can't stand having to deal with those kinds of details. I don't think these people are that important. But other participants at the convention there who had more money invested in Barenboim wanted him to show up. So they paid for it. And then they came to us, of course, and asked us for money to help offset the cost. And I told them where they could stuff Barenboim. But that's not the point. Barenboim is standing there on the platform. And I said, we are really excited to be able to give an award to a conductor who has an appreciation of the rich German tradition of Beethoven performance. Barenboim is like a Furtwängler clone and all that. So I was trying to be very political and nice and diplomatic. And the Beethoven is great. I mean, it is. So, I said, and it was so much better than the competing cycle that came out on a certain yellow label this year. I said, not mentioning names. And the gasp that came from the audience. I mean, it just sucked all the oxygen out of the room. And Barenboim looked horrified. He was appalled. And he was like, and that I said that he's better than the other guy. Now, we know. Barenboim thinks he's better than everybody. So his horror was not entirely believable. But more to the point was the idea that these people are so important and they're such big names. They're beyond criticism. And I just looked at everybody and I said, relax, folks. I do this for a living. It's okay. We're giving him one because he's better than the other guy, right? That's why we're here. And it was like, it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. Those were the days. What can I tell you? So Abbado's sort of so-so okay Beethoven has its pluses and minuses. Okay, fine. Then we get his Mendelssohn cycle with the London Symphony. And the Mendelssohn cycle is really very, very good, although he did some earlier ones in London, a couple earlier ones, I think 3 and 4 or something like that were actually even better than the ones in the Deutsche Grammophon cycle. But they're good. I mean, they're really, really good performances. And you get all the overtures, and it's wonderful to have all this stuff together. It's tasteful, elegant, bracing, vivacious, intelligent Mendelssohn. Very, very good. Then we get his Brahms with the Lucerne Phil. These are all with the couplings, which were interesting because they were with all the small choral works. Abbado's Brahms in Berlin is the greatest thing he ever did, period, in the instrumental sphere. And it's absolutely great and wonderful to have, and I have nothing bad to say about any of it. It's wonderfully performed and wonderfully recorded. Then we get his Bruckner. And we don't get hysteria from the horse department in this particular case because his Bruckner was often very good. Mostly, not always. He did the first symphony 3 times. Can you believe it? And the one here is his last one with the Lucerne Festival Orchestra. Each time he did a different version. This is the Vienna version. Well, there weren't 3 versions then, but he did the Linz version and the Vienna version. It's a very fine performance. Really one of the best things he did in Lucerne. He had a real feel for this work for some odd reason. I mean, who runs around saying, gee, my signature piece is Bruckner's First Symphony? I mean, no one, but it seems to have been his. And he really, really did it well. So that's nice. And then we've got the Romantic, which is the 4th, which was so-so, not terrible. It's with Vienna. And then the 5th with Vienna, which is fantastic. It's one of the great 5ths. It really is. Brilliant, bracing, exciting. It's all the things you don't think Bruckner's 5th should be. And it really is. It's so unawkward and clunky sounding. You just can't believe it. It's really a marvelous performance. And then the seventh, which was so-so, and the ninth, which is not really good at all. The ninth was a bit of a mess. And so that's his Bruckner. And then we get Mahler. Oh dear. Now, as we all know, Abbado's best Mahler performances were the earliest ones, particularly the ones with Chicago. His 5, 6, and 7 specifically in Chicago, and 2, 5, 6, and 7 he did in Chicago. And they were very good, and they were better than anything he did later. None of them are in here. Of course not. It's mostly Berlin and then Lucerne Festival. Symphony number 1 with the Berlin Phil. Very good. That's live. That was probably the best of his remakes. It was better than the Chicago one only because the Chicago one was one of those early digitals that had just this very intangible and diffuse sonic framework that really sucked a lot of the excitement out of the performance. It had like no climaxes and no dynamics, except it was either very, very loud or very, very soft. This Berlin one is spontaneous and fresh. It maybe because it was live, very, very beautiful. Okay, number 2. This is the one with the Lucerne Festival Orchestra that for some reason some people swore by. And we've talked about it on this site before, and most of you have agreed with me that it really is a completely average to middling Mahler 2. His best one was the Chicago one by a long shot. And I mean, that one was taut and exciting and ferocious and very well played. This one is just flabby and again, sonically a bit diffuse. And the orchestra, I mean, they're okay, but it's his pickup orchestra. What are we expecting from these people? Honestly, I really find it baffling. It was coupled with a really mediocre La Mer. It was just a weird coupling. I was just astonished that people spend so little time making comparisons, because it's not like, I understand it's all subjective and it's a matter of opinion, but the fact that the Chicago one is better played than the Lucerne one, that's not a matter of opinion. The fact that the interpretation is more exciting, that the rhythms are tighter, that's not a matter of opinion. It's really not. I mean, this one has nothing exciting going for it at all. It strikes me as a total unnecessary endeavor. Okay, number 3, this is with Berlin, right? Yeah, it's with Berlin. Also, it was a bit of an improvement over his Vienna one, which had some strange things going on with it. It was kind of, it had, oh goodness, I just remember at some point at the end of the third movement, somebody dropped a tambourine. I'm a percussionist. I listen for things like that. There were some weird noises, and the finale was very slow and somewhat flat and static. The whole performance was. This one is a little bumpier, so it's a little better. It's still not thrilling. And then there's the 4th with Berlin with Renee Fleming, which is okay, not exciting. The 5th was not as good as the Chicago one. The 6th is not as good as the Chicago one, although it's good. It's actually a good 6th. The 7th is really not as good as the Chicago one. The 8th was completely forgettable, I thought. I mean, some people liked it a lot. I just think it was very small scale and lacking in I mean, if you're not going to have an 8th that's just replete with grandeur, I mean, what is the point of doing the 8th? It's just not worth the effort. And then the 9th. I like this 9th. This live 9th was very good. It's very, very interesting, actually, because he does a couple of he does some orchestral retouching or untouching in the percussion parts at the end of the Rondo Burlesque that's actually in keeping with the manuscript score, which I saw in the Pierpont Morgan Library. Like he takes out the bass drum right at the end where it's there's 2 big bass drum rolls, and no, they're not in there. They were added possibly by Bruno Walter, and Abbado doesn't do them. So there are some things like that, but it's a lively, and again, there's no large scale vision in this later Mahler. It's all somewhat diminutive, but it's a good 9th. It's all in proportion. Let me put it to you that way. It works quite well. like the first movement and the last movement take almost exactly the same time. I think he got the music under his skin and was able to finally, transmit a certain vision. I did see him do the Ninth live with Berlin at Carnegie Hall. It was horrible. Oh my God. He spent the whole time conducting the violas. He never looked at anybody else. It was the weirdest thing you've ever seen in your life, and it was so uninflected. And this one is much, much better than that performance was. And with that, I think, is that the whole thing? My goodness, I think we're done. I really do. I think that was it. Wait a minute, let me just make sure. Yeah, we're done. That's all 41 CDs. Boy, that went quickly. And that is the Abbado Symphony edition. And it's got great Brahms. It has a couple really fine Bruckners. It has a couple really fine Mahlers. And the rest is completely unnecessary. Which means that on the whole, despite those decent things, remember, there's also an Abbado Mahler box and an Abbado Brahms box and an Abbado Bruckner box, and separately. No reason in the world to own this. None. It makes no sense. I mean, it really shouldn't even be available anymore because there's so many other Abbado boxes. I just can't get over how many Abbado boxes there are. But there it is. It's a doorstop. It gets the Doorstop of the Year award. And that's that, although it's been out for a while. Anyway, keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.